I overall think Starfield is a fun game, and I also think it is the best Bethesda title since Oblivion. But Starfield is not a perfect game by any means either. So even though I think the game is good overall, it does have glaring flaws and issues that I hope will either get fixed in the future with updates, or if certain flaws are never fixed, then I hope we see future BGS games improve by not having the same flaws and issues that Starfield currently has. But before we get to the critiquing, make sure to like and subscribe, because where would you all be without my wisdom? The internet is just a cesspool, and I am just a beacon of light in the darkness. The first issue I want to bring up that Starfield has, and the other BGS games also have, is the fact that their dungeons, or as Starfield calls them, points of interest, suck. Now, every dungeon in every Bethesda game has pretty much sucked as a general rule. And the reason for this is simple. They all feel the exact same way. In Skyrim, every Draugr ruin is basically the same. In Oblivion, every Iliad ruin is basically the same. And in Fallout 4, every hospital is the same too. And the reason it is like that is because all the dungeons in those games use the exact same assets. And asset reuse isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if you reuse assets too much, then everything starts to feel the same. And a good non-Bethesda game studio example that I can come up with is how the Chalice dungeons are all exactly the same pretty much in Bloodborne. The issue Starfield has is even worse. Instead of making a bunch of remix dungeons that are near identical like previous BGS titles, they decided to reuse the exact same dungeon over and over again. Every time you see a Cryolab dungeon / point of interest, it is the exact same point of interest from layout, loot containers, and even enemy placement. So even though the Cryolab point of interest is different from the Abandoned Mine point of interest, it isn't good that I've pretty much memorized all of them by heart at this point, because Bethesda keeps feeding me and other people who do explore the planets that they made specifically to be explored the exact same things with little to no change. Now, the best fix, in my opinion, is simple. Bethesda should make like 5 or whatever the magic number is, more types of the same dungeon. So that way there's more variety in the POI pool for the specific dungeons rather than what we currently get, which is the exact same point of interest layout over and over again. I also think they should do what Daggerfall did with its dungeons and Bloodborne did with its Root Chalice dungeons, which is add random generation to them. At least that way we won't be exploring the exact same dungeon every time. And of course they should add more assets to their dungeon resource pool, so that way the dungeons we do explore on the planets are not so samey. And they also don't fall into the trap that the previous Bethesda games have, with them also feeling samey even if they are technically different. The next issue I want to bring up in Starfield is the main quest. It's pretty obvious that Starfield's main quest is some of the best work that Bethesda has done in a while. It's better than Fallout 4's, and it's especially better than Morrowind's boring main quest. The reason I find it better is because I find the idea of the Starborn to be interesting in concept, and I like the multiverse stuff like the mission Entangled, the final showdown with the Starborn to get the last artifact, and I also like the New Game Plus alternate dimensions you can possibly get when you enter the Unity. Starfield's main quest, even though it is the best they have written yet, still falls victim to the same issue every other main quest in any modern Bethesda game has. And that issue is that it's the weakest part of the game. The Crimson Fleet, Vanguard, Rangers, and Ryujin are way more interesting to play through than the main quest is. The big issue with the main quest, in Starfield specifically, is that the first half of the plot is literally you going to collect magic rocks with the people of Constellation, who are insufferable to be around. I get that the point of the first half of the game is to introduce you to the major cities and side factions, but the issue is that it's boring to play through. And the main quest doesn't get interesting in my opinion until after you get a visit above Neon from the Helix. Now, I also think the main quest fix is simple. I would prefer that they abandon the idea of the main quest entirely and focus on making more side factions and side quest content. But if they insist on making a main quest, It needs to be as good as their side factions, because it looks bad that part of your game that the most people will play is also the worst part too. But if they continue to insist on making a main quest, then I would suggest letting the person who wrote the Vanguard quest do it, because the side faction has a good story and was interesting all the way through, start to finish. The New Game Plus mechanics, they should add more alternate universes, and you should be able to kill everyone in Constellation yourself. Your other you gets to wipe them out, so why shouldn't you be able to also? The next points I will make will be a series of small ones instead of big ones. Number 1, shipbuilding needs to let you decide how your habs connect together instead of it auto-correcting. And you should be able to manually place the ladders yourself because again, the game does it for you. If you are not careful, the game will turn your ship into a labyrinth, and it got pretty frustrating for me personally. Number 2, the storage space of containers in your house should be unlimited like it is in the other Bethesda games. It sucked in Morrowind to have a max storage capacity, and it sucks in Starfield too. I hate that the Lodge is the only place with an unlimited storage container. 3, they gotta work on the performance of New Atlantis because it still sucks. 4, they need to diversify the morality of the members of Constellation more, because they all fall on the same spectrum of good to varying degrees. 5. Like Skyrim, I hate that we keep missing the big wars in the setting. In Skyrim, the Great War versus racist High Elves sounds way better than the Return of Dragons. Just like how the colony war with mechs and bioengineered creatures is way more interesting than collecting rocks. 6. Why are mechs not in the game? Just because they are outlawed doesn't mean that criminal organizations wouldn't still use them. And mechs are always cool, so I want to use one and own one. 7. We should be able to make outposts into settlements like you can in Fallout 4. I want to make a city on ruined Earth, but I can't do it like I can on Fallout 4. And 8, the last point. Better weapons for your ship shouldn't be locked behind perk points. That's a really stupid idea that they actually implemented into the game. If you have the credits, you should be able to get the upgrades. Again, I really enjoyed Starfield, and it's the best game that they've released since 2006. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the game is flawless. Let me know in the comments on the things you think need to be improved and how it should be done. You are all welcome that I made the video and graced you with my wisdom. Now,
I'm sorry, sir. It's time for you to leave.